This is Daring Conversations, and we have assembled an amazing group of 9 folks that are deeply involved with the transition U.S. movement, some for many years. And we want to have a space for a conversation that, or a single conversation around a set of issues that we know there are different points of view within transition on. And a case in point, the 2 that I lead with are, what do transition folks have to say, want to say, feel about the utility and value of talking about capitalism as the economic system that structures the crisis that we're in, the global climate crisis? And to what degree do transitioners, transition initiatives feel they can get involved in local politics, for example, on the electoral level in particular, as transition people? And so there's going to be a variety of viewpoints about this. I hope this will be lively. That's what's meant by the title Daring Conversations. And I anticipate that will be the case because I know these people and I love these people. And we do disagree on many things. We've never had an opportunity to really do that conversation. And so that's part of the value of this. So know that none of us speak for Transition US in the capacity of this talk. We are speaking as individuals who contribute to Transition US, and we're speaking about both our personal views and maybe in some cases what we think would be good for Transition US to do. And this is not a decision-making space. This is a space to share ideas. And we also want to involve everybody who's on the call. So to do that, we have to get right to it, as Don Lemon says on CNN every evening. And let's get right to it. That's my introduction. We're going to do this. There are 9 of us, and each person is pledged not to speak for 5 seconds more than 3 minutes. And you may hear a bicycle bell that will remind whoever is speaking to complete their sentence and their thought ASAP. All right, so as I said, I'm John Foran. I'm a member of the Collaborative Design Council, the 16 folks from across the country who are essentially a kind of general assembly for Transition US. I've done it for 3 years. That's my term. I'm in Santa Barbara, California. I teach sociology and environmental studies at the University of California, and that's relevant because as a scholar activist and a transitioner at EcoVista, our community transition initiative next to the university, as a scholar activist, we talk about capitalism all the time. We are comfortable doing that. And what can I say? I did not prepare these remarks, so they're going to be spontaneous. And 3 minutes is going to go by like that, and I'll be off. Anyway, first thing I want to say is that there are all kinds of views within Transition US. Transition US as a cutting edge, new social movement that is concerned with the climate crisis, has been for 15 years. It's national in scope, global in scope. There are going to be a lot of different views. And I'm not going to say I think transition should declare itself as like an intersectional eco-socialist organization. Although that might describe my personal politics, although I'm not an organization. But my analysis is that we live in an interconnected set of crises. Capitalism is one, global economy. Another is the climate crisis. That's what really moves me to get up every morning and try to figure out what are some fun, effective, powerful ways we can confront the climate crisis. So after many years of thinking about this, I've come to the conclusion, and I tell my students, that I think capitalism does drive the climate crisis. And therefore, we have to think at least post-capitalism. You don't have to be anti-capitalist. You can just be post-capitalist. That means that you know that the climate crisis is not going to be confronted effectively within the rules of the economic or the political game, okay, as we know them. So those have to be changed. And thus, I like to talk about post-capitalism because any transition vision I've ever come across doesn't look like capitalism if it's realized fully. On the question of elections, a lot of transitioners say, we don't want to get involved. You know, the Green Party used to say, we're not left or right, we are in front. Now, they were a party, but that's a kind of a sentiment that I think we have. And we have people from across the spectrum, just as we have people that like capitalism, we have people that are across the political spectrum. But there's also a view that transition should stay out of politics, that that's inappropriate and somehow that weakens us. And I'll just stop by saying, on the contrary, I think that we should be involved in local politics, whether as transition or not. We should be supporting candidates. We should be trying to build political power in our communities. And I think that's the kind of, I think even Rob Hopkins, not to quote like God or anything, I think even Rob Hopkins believes basically that we're involved in local politics. I don't know how we can't. So I spoke long and quickly without much, and I'm going to pass to our next speaker. If I remind myself, you know who you are. Who is that? That is Jess Parfait, EcoVista. Jess Parfait, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I just want to do a quick audio check. Can folks hear me? Because my connection. Okay, cool. So my name is Jess Alvarez Parfait. I'm also a member of the Collaborative Design Council and also a staff member with Transition US. But I honestly feel like I've been a transitioner since as far back as I can remember. And I think it draws heavily from my experience being a multicultural, multiracial woman in the United States and having a critique of the system. The system was language that was present in my home from a very early age. Critique of the system and knowledge that we could do better for ourselves and for each other. So I think the things that I want to presence in this conversation, and I'm coming up on a year with transition in December, is being able to look out and feel like sometimes I don't see myself represented in this movement. And then there's the paradox that I do see myself represented in folks who are thinking critically about whole systems approaches, thinking about how we can do the inner and the outer work, right? But at the same time, I think if this movement is really going to live up to its full potential, I mean, we carry the name transition, for goodness sakes. We really need to be attracting younger, more diverse folks into the work. And I also want to acknowledge that these are the folks that are doing some of the most dynamic, creative, and disruptive work out there. So I think that's something that I really want to acknowledge, is that this movement really does need to diversify. This is something that I think is like a glorious challenge for us all to tackle together in relationship. And the other paradox that I would like to bring up is this delicate balance between order and structure and openness, spontaneity, right? That is something that I love about transition, is that it is so open and all-encompassing. If you're gonna do it, do it. So I think I really appreciate the whole systems approach that's embedded in the DNA of this organization, but it sometimes can be, what do we describe it as? Herding cats, like where do we all go, right? And I think the thing that has come up for me is just like, we have a lot of these wonderful protocols and technologies, things like sociocracy, things like pro-social, all of these ways of working together, right? And I think these are great tools. I'm also just thinking, like, how can we do a better job of acknowledging difference and the unique stories, skills, and experiences that we're all bringing into the mix? And I think this is a real area of need and a real opportunity to find better ways to usher people into the movement so that they can see themselves as part of something way beyond just a 501c3 or a transition initiative. I believe transition does not belong to Transition US or the transition movement. This might be controversial. I think it belongs to humanity. And so how are we being emissaries and ambassadors for this new way of being human in a world wrought with crisis? And crisis also means opportunity. So I'm going to yield my time there. And those are the thoughts I'd like to bring forward.
Woohoo!
Thank you, Jess Alvarez Parfait. And next to Jewel Bystrova.
Yes, hello. I might want to mention, Marissa, your bell didn't sound off, so maybe I heard it in the other room. Hi, I'm Jewel Bystrova. I have been with transition, doing transition work since early, let's see, 2008. when it came to my little town of Sebastopol, California. We were, I think, the fourth initiative. And I am both a healer and an activist, and I was attracted to transition because there was room there for me to fully express both parts of that, of myself that way, as an activist and as a healer. And I feel like that is transition. I still, to this day, feel like that is transition's big strength. And so many of us now in the Inner Resilience Network are fully going, just have big plans for ways that we can weave all of the needs that we have, that we've seen that we've had, the ones that Jessica has spoken to so eloquently about, the need for diversity, the need for good communication, balance in the process that we're evolving through right now. So I'm really looking forward to the evolution of this, and I feel like it's happening. And we're having many conversations, and there are people coming in, like the IRN has been partnering with people, other communities that are diverse, people of color, and other cultures. So I'm really excited about how we are tilling the soil for change right now. So I have a lot of optimism and hope for transition. I do see that as far as how we get involved politically, this is such a charged subject, and I've often really felt like we shouldn't be involved politically. But now I'm beginning to believe that there's such a need for a platform of bridging divides and holding a space for the dynamic tension of many views and many ideologies. Transition people tend to be in the circles that are more often identified as left-leaning or liberal. And I want to kind of push back against that a little bit and say, let's find a way to bring together, because there are values in those that are right-leaning and conservative that also are important to be heard. And how can we bring them together and listen to all values, all perspectives in a healthy system? That dynamic tension is so important for balance. And I'd like to see us not get too far into what's identified as liberal or left. There are things in the liberal left that I will always champion, such as the resistance work and the divestment work and things like that, and anti-racism. But there's things in the conservative camp that also are really important to listen to. So let's embrace that which unifies us, which celebrates our humanity, that celebrates the whole system approach, and not what fragments and divides us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jewel. And we round out the first fishbowl of 4 with Don Hall themselves. And I'm about to put something in the chat that Jewel reminded me of, another event this evening that will build off this event, and we'll go 2 hours. So we'll have many voices, we hope. And here it is. Over to you, Don.
Great, thanks. I guess mostly I'm just glad that we're having this conversation. I'm executive director of Transition US, but I'm also an individual with my own perspective and an open mind, always willing to be changed. I think that it is important that transitioners grapple with politics. Politics is a major force in our world. It affects our work, and we're going to need political solutions as well as grassroots culture change solutions if we are going to address the urgent crises of our time successfully. So I think that we do need to be engaged with politics, but we also need to do it differently. I think that, I was involved with political activism before I got involved with transition. And one of the things that drew me to transition was that it wasn't divisive, that it wasn't always fighting against, that it wasn't exaggerating the truth, that it had a different kind of a culture, a different kind of approach to changing the world, doing it from the bottom up with positive, constructive solutions and trying to create a really big tent. I know we've said many times we need an unprecedented coming together of society if we are going to make this transition successfully. And that means that we can't get pigeonholed. We can't see ourselves as a movement against those people. We need to eventually find ways to bring those people into this movement. So while we can't abide by people and organizations that are spreading hate and lies, we do need to find a way to work together with people that don't necessarily agree with us on everything. Because if we don't, we're going to have a very small movement here. We need to reach out beyond our familiar circles and find places where we do have common ground. We don't have to agree on everything to work together on those things that we do agree on. And I think we need to use our principles as a guiding force. We got some great transition principles that can help to guide us in this, and also our mission here. I think there's, you know, a million different causes that we can get involved with, and they're all worthwhile. But if we don't have some kind of strategic focus to our work, we end up getting diluted and we're not going to make much of an impact anywhere. So I think it's a fine balance. I think that particularly on the local level is where we have a lot of political leverage. You know, advocating for policies that support transition, even people running for a local office. I think it gets more complicated when we get up to the state and national level, where there's a lot more money involved, a lot more vitriol, a lot more polarization, and yeah, more of that kind of divisive political game that we see so often on the news. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Don. Although I will say I would back your campaign for Vice President of the United States. We're going to turn now to Shakhtari Bellu, who unbelievably has a PowerPoint. Shakhtari, you are so organized. You are like the wise scientist teacher among us.
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. So I agree with everything everybody said. And so I just wanted to walk through some ways of looking at this. And I want you to first of all know that this PowerPoint is available. It will be available. I haven't hooked it in yet as a PDF. So if anybody wants to go back and look at any of these or the hot links or anything, they'll be there. So as far as dealing with politics, from the standpoint of Transition US as an organization, no, I don't think we should be, you know, stating political one way or another. However, look at the richness of this conversation right here. This is when you're amongst friends and you know and trust each other. Yes, please, let's have these conversations over and over again. Let's explore new ways of seeing things. But if we're talking about people who have never been part of the transition movement or just defining us for the first time, it has to be, first of all, a safe space. It has to be a place where they feel seen and valued and heard. And so that's why at that stage, we need to look more at how we frame things so that what we say can be heard and people can listen for understanding. So how do we do that? How do we create that open, willing space? Well, we make, first of all, that our highest priority when we're doing events, when we're doing things. And then we look at how can we create connection and trust and safety. So there are ways of doing that. So let's talk about some of them. We can create structure and tools that help engage all stakeholders, and I mean all, with great respect, listening and understanding skills. We can create methods for broadening and deepening the conversations and getting beyond sound bites. So framing using these aspects, please, and let's listen for what's needed and wanted. But let's look at tools. How about a database? I've been doing this since 2008. I was one of the original trainers, and I'd love to see us. Whoops, something just happened.
Yeah, Shakhtari, we weren't seeing your screen, so I just put up your presentation. I don't know which slide you're on.
You weren't seeing it?
No.
Oh, shoot. Okay. So
but I have it up now.
Okay, perfect. So I'm sorry. Should I start over? What do you want me to do?
Yeah, just keep going from where you're going. Just let me know which slide you're on.
Okay, I was playing off of the slides. So, So you were able to follow that. So on the database one. So if we were creating a database, and by the way, we're going to have some host your own events. So anybody who's interested in doing this and creating this with me, please do so. So if we're looking at what data do we need to actually make this so that any transition locale could say, okay, what have we learned from the years that we've already been doing this? And how could we utilize some of that knowledge here in our locale? Well, what do we have that's similar? How about bioregional specifics? How about community specifics? Are we an agrarian? Are we suburban? Are we urban? What is our ethnicity, our race, our language, our religions that everybody shares? If you'll hit the next one.
Shaktari, your time is actually up. I'm sorry, the bell's not coming through very good.
Okay, can I get just a tad more so I can flip through the slides really quickly? Because that was sort of the whole point, and then people can go get this if they want it.
You can show us the slides maybe, but you can't read them. We don't have time for that.
I'm reading them. I'm not reading them. So design specifics, climate, whoops, okay. Also what works, okay. There's the link to the host your own event. Keep going. I'm not doing the slides you are, so I can't, there. Go to the next one. Okay, how do we create feedback loops? How do we look at, indicators of whether we're actually succeeding in what we're trying to do? Next. Next slides. How do we, go back to the last one.
Shaktari, there's not time to actually do this. You have many slides.
That's important, John. Just show that, please. How do we agree on what these terms mean? And how do we have conversations using the evidence that's all over the world? And those are links to some of the definitions. I don't know if your definitions match. Go ahead to the next one now. And then how do we come freshly to a state of not knowing so that we can truly create what we want? We've already made up the world, the way humans interact in it, so we can continue doing that. But let's do that with creativity and create a space where we deal with the complexity and we honor all stakeholders. I'm done.
Thank you, Shaktari. Sorry for the technical difficulties and the hard nudge from myself. Yeah, we are coming to a quartet of concluding speakers, and I'm guessing Galen is up next because and over to you, Galen.
All right, thank you. And thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'm also resonating with pretty much everything that's being said here so far. I really want to highlight, so the piece that I want to bring to this is, how can the transition movement facilitate a higher capacity to sort of navigate the complexity, to hold what seem like dichotomies, which I view as false dichotomies. And Shaktari's presentation pointed out a lot of these concepts that resonate with me. Jess said transition does not belong to transition US, and that resonates with me. That this is a movement that we are here to facilitate, and the idea of the movement is that everybody in place can be facilitated to participate in a more whole, in a more full manner, which means bringing in our own personal individual views, offering it to the collective processes. So I think transition is about practicing, expanding our ability, increasing our capacity for collective meaning making, and for collective sense making, and for collective decision making. And so it's not for anybody in any particular position to stand as authority and say what these things are about. I really want to highlight this idea of the pro-social balance between self-interest and collective good. This is another false dichotomy, in my view, that we can learn through these kinds of regenerative facilitation methods. We can learn how to better integrate. Sometimes it's about finding balance, but also sometimes it's about finding those synergies when we identify the common ground, whether it's between different political views or whether it's between the importance of individual needs and the importance of collective needs, we can really do a lot to enhance our collective sense making and collective decision making. To me, the transition movement is a branch of the permaculture movement. The transition is about learning how to cooperatively participate in managing our cultural commons. Our cultural ecosystems are very much like our biological ecosystems, and they thrive on diversity. And so it's not our goal to identify the most important species and try to turn everybody into that species. It's our goal to try to understand the relationships between the different cultures, between the different worldviews, between the different values, between the different perceptions and ideas about how to go about to make change in the world. It's our goal to help folks in place practice these skills, because democracy depends on participation, and we're living in a world where we're kind of consumers of democracy, and that just doesn't work. So it's about us participating fully. And the last thing,
time's up, brother.
Thank you. So I'll just leave it there, and I appreciate you all.
We appreciate you, Galen, so much more than you know, even though we tell you all the time and we tell each other that. And that's what's the beauty of this. And I see Jess Cahoda is eager to have a few words with us. Over to you, Jess.
Hey, thanks everyone. Hello, my name is Jess C. And in 2008, I helped catalyze a local initiative here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was wildly successful, even though it is in dormant mode currently. There are many different actions that have continued since that time. And I am currently a facilitator on the Collaborative Design Council. So I was really resonating with all of the themes that came through, and some things that have stuck with me, some words: liberation, neutralizing, generating bridges, common ground, synergies, and participation. And that was going to actually be part of what I was speaking to today. And part of my inspiration comes from a book published in 2018 by Charles C. Mann called The Wizard and the Prophet. And it essentially chronicles the lives of two different men who have helped shape our dueling global conversations and blueprints about environmentalism. Both of them thought that they were saving the world. And so the wizard is really focused on science and technology. When appropriately applied, it can get us out of any mess. It's about techno-optimism, capitalism, innovation, production, and affluence as the answer for the future. His name was Norman Borlaug, and he was the father of the Green Revolution to feed the world. The prophet is the way that I actually see traditional environmentalists, that curtailment is the only way for the growing global population to live within the ecosystem's limits. It's also thought of as apocalyptic environmentalism. Technology is the problem. It focuses on scaled economics, less is more, and affluence is our greatest enemy, not the answer. You can see the polarization there. It's to cut, cut, cut. And there is a huge contrast between these two conversations. And it is actually what I think has contributed to the paralyzation of measurable solutions towards, living in prosperity with with a growing population on the earth. But that's not the issue. The issue is what is visible and invisible. For the wizards, it's about technology and hopeful innovation and affluence, and it's comfortable and it's measurable and you get something at the end. There's immediate gratification for the individual, and there's this amazing perception of long-term prosperity. So who wouldn't buy into that, right? And then when you're talking about the profits, what do you get at the end? Except for, and it's impossible to measure the outcomes, and what you get is a vague hope of a longer runway for the earth and her inhabitants. So my question is, how can living regeneratively, its outcomes and its outputs, become visible and measurable? Is technology the answer? What is the answer to that? And how can we help measure that and provide hope, not only in our daily acts, but also, for groups of folks that have curtailed, what has their impact been? What is our community's happiness impact? Have we cut carbon calories, and what is our air quality, and how can that come about?
JC, your time is up. Thank you.
Well, perhaps our next speaker, John Duvall, can answer some of those difficult questions. Before John starts, I want to acknowledge and put in a plug for a national working group that never came to be, that John and I shared, and it was called Transition U, or Transition Schools. And we must have met for about 18 months and had many conversations. Shakhtari was in those, others were in those, and we learned a lot for ourselves. And then we realized it was like a mind-boggling and a difficult thing to do. Over to you, John. What are the answers, John, if not the questions?
So, in my own inimitable style, I'm going to introduce a word that I haven't heard yet, and that's collapse. I wrote out I'm not going to be quite as spontaneous as everybody. Our transition movement emerged a decade and a half ago from concerns about human-caused climate change and the peaking of oil production. In our view, the vast expansion of population and consumption over the past 2 centuries is simply unsustainable, and a potential collapse looms on the horizon for our civilization and even for our species, not to mention millions of other species. However, most people today either don't recognize these concerns or regard them as threats in the distant future. The systemic roots of our predicament are beyond the grasp of most people, including, I might say, some of the people in transition. They expect the future to be a lot like the present and the recent past. Most of them simply can't conceive of a world in which driving cars or surfing the internet may no longer be possible, let alone a world where water, food, or governmental services may become scarce. Is there a way for the transition movement to bridge this gap, to motivate people to come together for constructive action and community planning amidst this current polarization in our society? Honestly, I'm not so sure, but I am pretty sure that it won't be achieved by central governments. To make progress, some change of political focus and direction is required. I want to suggest 2 approaches that may at least lead us to give us a chance for progress. First, we need to refocus on that core transition concept of relocalization. First the neighborhood, then the community, then the city and the county. Local government can and must be our ally, but that will only happen if there's sufficient preparation by bringing together a network that includes a critical mass of all relevant stakeholders through communication models like pro-social, which has been mentioned, and organizational models like sociography, which I believe Jess Palfrey mentioned earlier. Second, we need to move beyond employing concepts and rhetoric that evoke a polarizing response. Words like capitalism and socialism are simply not useful in this context, compared to, say, a proposal for emergency preparedness, which almost everybody can get on board with. Everyone, regardless of their political identity, has a stake in their own survival. In my opinion, neither traditional conservative perspectives on limited government or capitalist economics, nor liberal programs of expanding national social support networks are likely to be sustainable amidst the limits being imposed by scarce resources and climate change on our finite planet. If we are to create communities capable of surviving this coming collapse, we need to rely on consensus building methods and think clearly about how we can create a unified vision for community survival in both the short term and the long term. So thanks very much for listening to all my dire premonitions.
Thank you, John, teacher of teachers. And our closer, to use a baseball term, is our ringer, Marissa Momertz. Over to you, Marissa.
Thank you. I do have my timer on, but feel free to back me up on that. All right. 3 main points I would like to make. One is code switching, one is collective liberation, and one is that resistance is necessary. Okay, so we must understand power structures. Jewel, if you don't mind muting your speaker volume, because she's in my guest room and the echo is a little distracting. We must understand power structures, including and especially capitalism, and know how to effectively and strategically organize in relation to those systems. We need to understand who we're talking to and which language we need to lead with. And that piece around creating a safe space, as I put in the chat, like safety really depends on who we're talking to. And for the people in frontline communities, what will make them feel safe is knowing that we are anti-racist and understand that capitalism lies at the root of the climate crisis. We don't need to put up billboards announcing that transition is anti or post-capitalist. I've specifically talked to David Cobb about that. So do we need to put up billboards saying that we're anti-capitalist? No, but we need to understand capitalism and that capitalism lies at the heart of the climate crisis. Please read Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, if you haven't already. And we need to align our actions with our values. This means divesting our resources, our labor, and our souls from capitalism, and reinvesting them in building the solidarity economy. My sense is that if we're unwilling to understand that capitalism, if we need to shy away from any conversation about systems of power or keep it in the intellectual realm rather than the heart realm, my sense is that it may be coming from a place of unwillingness to acknowledge and take responsibility for our privilege. So collective liberation. In order to reclaim our democracy and institute the policies needed to end our dependence on fossil fuels and support ecosystem regeneration, we first need to build powerful working relationships with all aligned movements of people who are negatively affected by our extractive, exploitative economy and broken political system and who are deeply invested in transforming them. Recognizing that all of our struggles are intimately connected and that we must work together to build a better world is known as collective liberation. And I have an essay on this I'm going to put in the chat. Finally, I want to say resistance is sometimes necessary. That example of Rob Hopkins' project, Atmos Totnes, 14 years of community love and labor sold out from under them. And Rob said, you know, we will get that site back. There are times when we must resist, and if we're not willing to fight and protect the gains that we've made, what are we doing here?
Thank you, Marissa. I think I want to thank all of the 9 who have spoken so far for their beautiful thoughts and diverse, very, very diverse thoughts. I also want to begin by acknowledging all the comments that folks have posted in the chat so far. They're rich and wonderful, and we will save them. And the question is what to do now. We are 40-something people with 20 minutes to have a conversation. And I was sort of panicked about this. So I sent a few messages to some of my associates, and various suggestions were received. Let's pull out the juiciest themes and open up a larger convo. Well, I, for one, could never figure out what were the juiciest themes. I could barely, keep my head above water. Let's do a go-round response. Not completely clear either. I'll keep noodling. The problem with the go-round is the time issue. But then we have the wise, keep seeking. The design will reveal itself, I was told by a wise person in the room, whom I won't identify. I think what we can do is create a stack of folks who want to speak, who are not among the 9 speakers, and maybe go with that, with the proviso to keep the remarks short. And I don't think we need to have direct responses. I think we could have as many voices as possible. And let's see how that goes. And by short, I mean, like 90 seconds. If there's more people that want to speak, then we have minutes. We get down to a minute, et cetera. And I'm comfortable with that to kind of maximize the voices in the room. So to be on that stack, put your name in the chat. and we will monitor it. Or raise your hand as Nicola has done, but I can't see everyone at the same time. But let's start with Nicola.
Hello, I'm from Transition Network based in the UK. I've really enjoyed this lively conversation. Thank you all so much. I just wanted to, what did I want to say? I want to say, I think people might get involved in transition for all sorts of reasons, but I think once you get deeper involved, that sort of deepening must lead someone to have that sort of sense of, okay, we're looking for an alternative to capitalism here. And I think actually that transition should be bold, that capitalist economies cannot be the answer. That can't be our future. But I also, while we still operate in that world, I do think also, maybe it's contradictory, that transition groups should partner with or try to influence local governments, you know, like in the Municipalities in Transition project. And I also think there's this element where there's a bigger movement for change, and there are others who are doing the whole standing for election things. So I don't think we ever need a transition political party, because there are others who are doing green parties or similar parties like that. And, you know, we don't have to be everywhere. We do our bit. We can support them in their doing their bit. Yeah, should a group endorse a local candidate for election? I think that's where a few issues could collide, including, did all of that group, every member of that group agree about that? Or is that actually, you know, going against something that somebody thinks in that group? Anyway, I'll leave it there, except to say that I really enjoyed Jess's call for a glorious challenge to diversify the movement. So thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Nicola. The stack, I see Lisa's hand and Francesca wrote down, so it'll be Francesca, then Lisa. And I want to raise the final question that a lot of people, that remains, that Nicola just referenced, which was, how do you see transition's relationship with potential partner organizations across the political and other spectrums? What positions do transition folk take vis-a-vis the range and scope of potential partnerships with organizations across all of these fields? And that's a very important question for transition and for the new transition that will come out of the summit. And we will have focused conversations on that as we go on in the summit. So the stack is Francesca, Lisa, Andrew.
Say hello.
Kia ora, I'm from Francesca, and I came in just to see what's happening in your space. I'm an activist, and I'm really involved in trying to engage people, what people have been saying here, in the general populace, because if you want some change, well, how do we do this? And in New Zealand, we've been focusing a lot at the moment on trying to make a common vision. Where are we going that we can get a better world for all of us? And how do you envisage the future? And we've been focusing on, you got to have some priorities. And one of the priorities is that everyone can see that we need to lower the temperature of the climate. And so if you're going to go towards getting away from some of these emergencies like the fire and the drought and all that sort of thing, that everyone can see that everybody needs to survive. One of the ladies said that survival is really important. So if you're going to go to a different world, how do you visualize that? And at the moment, I'm busy with a group with a local councillor to look at the fact that she wants to transition Wellington, where I live, into a space where we are essentially car-free. And like the US, we have a lot of roads, and the transport systems, certainly in New Zealand, aren't great. So to get people to think, well, how can we leave our car behind? How can we move to a world where we do this? And so we've started online things where people come together and say, how do we visualize the world? Because if you can't together get a visual of where you want to go to, what it looks like in a safe space, you're not going to get people along to leave their car behind and to say, oh, you must leave your car behind. So we're trying to look at, if you look at your city and you make it into a transition of mobility, and if you're going to be moving around differently because we have to leave fossil fuels behind. How will you do that? What are our avenues? And we've had a lot of cyclist action people, and we've now got cycle roads going in, and we have a councillor who wants to make Wellington car free by 2025, which is too short. But we're having a revisualizing Aotearoa online, and that's going to happen next week. And there's 6 different sessions, and people can come in and say, how are we going to do this? And the actual creating a visual new world is one of the most important, where you work together and you get the idea of a new whāreki, which in Māori means a new fabric, where you come from, and how are we going to do that together. And at the moment there's a real focus on collaborative populace talking about things, and yeah, that's really one step into trying to get a common ground.
Thank you,
it's
Francesca.
very difficult.
We're going to have
Thank
to
you
move
for
on.
all your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very, very much. And not to be rude, Francesca, I asked Marissa to be the enforcer, and she just
That's
promptly did
fine.
that. And we're happy to have someone. I don't know how you're managing it. If you are, as I understand, in Australia, I can never go to anything in Australia on Zoom.
It's New Zealand. It's New Zealand.
Even better, Francesca.
Not Australia.
Totally support what you're doing there. Yes, power to the model of New Zealand and her prime minister. 2, Lisa, and then Andrew.
Hello. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you. My name is Lisa. I am a first-time elect politician. I'm going to use the word because I know it's going to activate everyone. I know I'm activated. I'm really enjoying hearing this conversation because if you had told me that I would be a local elected official, I'm a councilwoman, 5-10 years ago, I would have laughed. I'm an advocate and activist for maternal health and reproductive justice, for the environment, all the good things you all are talking about here. And I want to share my story about my experience. I think it's the reason I chose to run for office is because we need more heart in those places. And if I don't participate, I can't ask the people who are in the places of leadership to, I can't point a finger, I can't blame, I have to participate. So that's my motivation and what inspired me to come in. And I have an inquiry. I think my personal experience has shown me that there's politics, the show. I have a television production background. There's the show of politics. And then on the local government level, it's people with a diversity of viewpoints who want to do good. And the models of nonviolent communication, the practice, like we can sit and study, but to actually practice nonviolent communication in places that are not quote unquote safe, to be the people to create the transition and to till those grounds of communication is hard. I've been doing it on my own for a long time. And I would like to encourage and inspire people to work with their local environmental commissions, work with your health department, like get involved in local government, not as endorsing elected officials, but what are the projects that you can get done? How can you bring the community together? There's so much wonderful activism and energy, people wanting to do things, but there's so many, what I find that I am learning in my own experience is that I am needing volunteers and people who are willing to be committed to being on committees and commissions to bring these culture changes. Your presence can bring the culture change. And I'm complete. Thank you.
Oh, that was very complete. And thank you. Where are you, Lisa, the elected council person?
I am in northern New Jersey in a town called New Milford in Bergen County. I'm in the New York metro area to give people a
Okay.
worldwide context in the US.
Beautiful, thank you. The stack is Andrew and Lisa Gibson, and I see Shakhtari, and I want to encourage folks who haven't spoken to raise their hands so you can get in the stack with 7 minutes to go. And I want to encourage our speakers to think in terms of 1 minute or so. Andrew.
Yes, thank you. This is Andrew Weiss in Southern California. I think this is a very incredibly powerful discussion here with the leaders of this movement. Very impressive. I think we need to do more of this, and it's evoking more great comments and discussion from the group here, from the listeners. My question is towards the group, especially towards Jess and everybody, regarding increasing diversity within the movement, especially amongst non-white folks, for lack of a better term, as well as the youth especially. And I'm just wondering exactly how do we go about doing that? Welcoming them, pardon for my words, inviting them in and attracting them in, and then once they're here, making them feel welcome and allowing them to participate in the best way possible. So I'd really like to know exact ideas about that. And I think all of our movements can use this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for that huge question. And I'm going to let Jess have a word at the end about that. But I'm first going to turn to Lisa Gibson with 6 minutes to go.
Hi there. Look, I've loved this conversation. I too think that we should have more of it. The only things I'd really like to add are the importance of the open and accountable government, particularly at the local level, because that's obviously where we're acting, and the importance of truth in media. And I think that obviously with our models where we're living, that is something that we really need to keep on top of, because it doesn't matter what we're doing if we're not getting the stories out there and we're being bombarded by the big corporations with their advertising campaigns and so on. It's difficult to really raise the profile and maintain the truth. And the final thing is the importance of Indigenous wisdom being supported by local councils at the local level for the same reason. And apart from that, thank you very much.
Wow, you really observed that 5-second warning. And that exhausts the stack for now. I said I would turn to Jess Alvarez-Parfrey for a thought, and I also have invited everyone to do the one-word essay, which I love doing in my classes. And that is drop a word in the chat of, how you're feeling actually about the conversation, how you're feeling in yourself at this moment, or how you would characterize it all as we start to say goodbye. And first, Jess will speak to us.
Yeah, just very briefly, I do have some comments in the chat for folks to reference, and I'd be happy to speak more on this important topic at the Building Bridges session. I think within transition, folks feel welcome when they see themselves actually represented within the movement. So it can be really hard when we're being gracious, we're really welcoming, and folks just still don't see themselves represented, and they feel like they can't bring their authentic self and experiences. So talking about code switching, that's something that I know how to do very well. I speak very differently when I'm in a space with women of color or other folks that I know really can resonate with my lived experience. That doesn't mean that we should stop trying to build authentic relationships, and intergenerational solidarity is especially important. So I'll leave it there and I'll speak more about it later at the Building Bridges session.
Announced it. That is an invitation to continue conversation this evening, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have a 2-hour slot. It will be hosted by Jewel Bastrova, Jess Alvarez-Parfrey, and myself. Continue to put your words in the chat. And Shaktari, I will happily give you a minute at this point.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I did post the slides, the PDF, on the event itself, so you can go back. It's down a little bit in the comments, and pick that up, please, and use it any way you want. The other thing I wanted to say is that the database, several people mentioned, how can we broaden the conversation and, you know, really include everyone? And one of the things we can do is create a database that's there for everyone to co-create together. More than just a transition movement, all movements. Let's do this so that we actually have tools at our hands that are, you know, powerful and growing constantly and adapting. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Do come and join us at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And as our hour comes to a close, I feel profoundly grateful that everybody came together and everybody spoke who wanted to speak. And many of you have spoken in the chat, and I feel good about this sort of conversation that we've had, that it has been a conversation. And maybe take a moment to acknowledge that this whole summit is a 16-day conversation. It's not the usual kind of conference, folks, and we get to talk to each other and build relationships and create networks and scheme together to change the world for the better. Whatever we want to call that world that's coming, let's do it, and let's be mindful and let's love each other. And that's the note on which I will end. That note of love will help us see us through this mess that we're in as we go forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gratitude.